25th of July. It's been a year since Economy.lk has been online, and we've been pushing across a lot of content. And the Front Row series has been one of the premier series, which has been interviewing a lot of experts, businessmen, members from the private sector, politicians, and experts. And in this 1 year, when we're celebrating 1 year on Economy.lk, we also have another expert on the trade side who will definitely add value and speak to us on certain things that are launching and will definitely support Sri Lanka's trade initiatives. So we welcome to the program Marcus Johns, who is a senior trade expert specialist at the World Bank, and he's based in Singapore. Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
So right now we're seeing, especially within the trade, a lot of work being done in terms of trade facilitation. For our viewers who are tuning in and watching, what briefly, I guess, is trade facilitation? And I think an important component of that has been the Trade Information Portal, which I think the World Bank has been keenly supporting and is launched as well. A bit about that and how the private sector will benefit from such initiatives.
Great. So look, thanks again for having me on to talk about this work. I think the starting point for us in looking at these issues is that Sri Lanka has a long history as a great trading nation, and we all know that Sri Lanka has great potential as well to be participating much more in international trade. But the reality is that there are a lot of weaknesses in the environment here that hold companies back, especially small firms, SMEs, from being more competitive in the international trading environment. So some of these are to do with policies. They might be to do with levels of tariffs, for example, which is an area that the government has been working with the World Bank on to reform. Some of them might have to do with infrastructure weaknesses, which has been a big area of investment in recent years. But we also think that a lot of the weaknesses are in this area of trade facilitation. And as you say, what do we mean when we say trade facilitation? We're really talking about the soft infrastructure of trade. We're talking about the policies and procedures and regulations that mean it takes a long time for companies to import and export from Sri Lanka. And this is an area where Sri Lanka is really punching below its weight internationally. When we look at some of the international indices for where Sri Lanka is on trade facilitation, in our Logistics Performance Index, Sri Lanka ranks 89th globally, which is well below where the country needs to be more competitive as a logistics hub and to unlock the potential for some of these importers and exporters. So within that trade facilitation agenda, that's where we're looking with the government at this Trade Information Portal as one important initiative. Yeah,
and if you take the portal as well, I think another step that has been thought of is this national single window, which for the private sector has been something discussed not only in the last decade but over the last 2 decades. How will this, with the launching of the Trade Information Portal, how does it link to the national single window? Will it make it really much more easier for an exporter or importer to know the regulations, to know the game, and to be able to not worry about these things, but to actually focus on their product and getting into new markets?
So look, the Trade Information Portal is really the first step in this process. What the Trade Information Portal is about is transparency. And again, this is an area where it's a big challenge for small firms in particular in Sri Lanka. What we've been doing over the last 6 months working with the government is helping gather all of the different policies and procedures and regulations relating to trade so they can be uploaded to this website to improve transparency. And it's quite striking when you look at the numbers. It's the equivalent of someone working for 161 days to gather all of these policies and regulations. So if you're an entrepreneur, you would have to spend half a year to gather all of the information needed to understand what policies and procedures affect trade. So that work is what the Trade Information Portal is to upload all of that into one place to improve transparency. Where the national single window comes in is the next step, is how do you move from improving transparency to really streamlining procedures for traders to make it much easier. And that's where we'll be working, we have been working for the last 6 months to develop what's called a blueprint for the national single window. This is setting out all of the different design specifications that would be needed to put this system in place. And the national single window would be a new IT system to link customs and all of the other government agencies involved in trade so they can communicate seamlessly with each other, and most importantly, to communicate with traders. So instead of going to multiple government agencies, what a business will be able to do is just submit information once to the government to get approval for a shipment coming into and out of the country. And what we've seen in many other countries around the world that have implemented these single window systems is it can have dramatic reductions in the time and cost involved to trade internationally. So Trade Information Portal is important, it's the first step, but really it's moving to the national single window that will deliver a lot of the streamlining for traders in the long term.
And I think, as you just mentioned, on implementation, I think that has been the Achilles heel with a lot of the policies that have come on board. What will be the challenges, I guess, in implementing this and making sure that there is a take on by the private sector, and also that maybe it's up to date in 2 or 3 years' time when regulation changes? How has that experience been in other countries where once these systems are in place, it's being harnessed to make sure that, as you said, 161 days is taken away and you just simply focus on the trade?
So for the national single window, it's a big national initiative, and we need to be realistic about that from the beginning. This is something that's not about clicking a button, about flicking a switch. It's going to take time to put that system in place. That's what the point of the National Single Window Blueprint has been, is that by doing all of this design work up front, it helps reduce the time to introduce the system in the long run, but it also helps build awareness among the private sector and among the different government agencies involved as to what will need to be put in place. So the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce has been a very active participant, and several members have been in the National Single Window Blueprint process. So we think some of that awareness is there from the beginning. Of course, there's a lot more to be done. That's going to be about implementing the project, but then once the single window is in place, about ensuring that it's used and that it's delivering the benefits that are expected. So the engagement has been there now, but it's going to need to continue in the months and years ahead to have this system really functioning and delivering for Sri Lanka in the long term.
And what have been some of the benefits, I think, in some of these other countries with implementations of these systems?
So for the Trade Information Portal, for example, we've seen that it can really make a big impact for small firms especially. Bigger firms have a trade department who can have a number of staff members who are out there searching for these policies and regulations. But when the Trade Information Portal is in place, it can cut down the time and cost required to search for those regulations for small firms especially. For the national single window, the benefits can be quite significant. We see that in terms of reduction in time to process imports and exports, reduction in cost as well. It can also help in the attraction of investment as well. We need to remember this is not just about trade. If we think about the role of the garment industry in Sri Lanka, for example, delays at borders can be very important in the competitiveness of that industry in the long term, but also for the industries of the future, where it's going to rely on moving goods quickly in and out of the country. So we've seen those gains in other countries, and we think that the potential is really there for Sri Lanka as well.
So I think you heard it from Marcus in how these two tools or this connection, which will definitely improve the trade, will actually benefit a lot of the SMEs, and we could see these incremental benefits. Something which might not really get a lot of the attention of the headlines, because it's something, as Marcus explained, a lot of the software infrastructure will come into play with the TIP and National Single Window. So I thank you, Marcus, for being on the show, and on our 1-year anniversary, we will definitely promise to put out similar videos which will enrich our viewers into different aspects of what is going on both globally and locally. Stay tuned.